Welcome back to my whole homestead. Today I'm going to be making a French Tomme cheese, and I thought it would be fun to take you along, show you the process. Cheese making is not hard, it's just a lot of little steps and it takes time. But other than that, when you're done, you end up with a beautiful homemade cheese. Welcome to my whole homestead, where the dream of self-sufficiency becomes a reality. We're the Twitchells, and we've just embarked on our biggest adventure yet, building our second homestead from the ground up in this new town we now call home. Here on the farm, we raise our own meat, grow a garden that's bursting with life, and cook our meals from scratch. We are passionate about sharing the journey, the lessons, and the rewards of homesteading with you. Whether you're here for inspiration, advice, or just a glimpse of the homestead life, we're so glad you've joined us. Making cheese is really just a battle of bacteria, so you want to make sure that there's no bad bacteria to get into your cheese so that the good bacteria can take over and do what it's supposed to do. So it's important to start with clean, sterilized equipment. What I like to do is, this is my cheese pot, and inside I've got a couple inches of water and then all of my cheese making utensils, and they're going to boil for about 10 minutes in there, and then I'll let it air dry and we'll be ready to make cheese. Besides making sure all of the utensils are clean and sanitized, I like to keep a bowl of water next to my cheese making. I put a little bit of this Star San solution in there, and that's what I use to make sure my hands are clean before they ever go into the cheese pot. So I wash them with hot soapy water, and then I dip them in the Star San solution, and then I dry them off with a clean towel. Gold standard for cheese making is fresh milked milk. Milk that hasn't been cooled down yet. It comes out of the cow the right temperature for cheese making. So that's what we're going to use today. You can make cheese with milk that you've refrigerated, and that's okay. You'll just have to bring it up to temperature. But for me, it's easiest just to have Jory come in with the milk. We filter it right into my cheese pot, and it's ready to go.
Probably have 3 gallons.
Did you say 3 or 2?
3. Sorry, is that heavy?
We have the milk filtered into the pot now, and I put inside my pot, I put little scratch marks at 2 gallons, 2.5, and 3 gallons, so that I know how much milk I have. It's important to know how much milk you have so that you can put the right amount of culture and rennet into your cheese. So I ended up with exactly 2.5 gallons. You also need a good thermometer when you're making cheese. I really like this one. It's digital. It has 2 probes, so I can tell the temperature of my water inside my big pot and the temperature of the milk. As you can see, the milk needs to be 90 degrees, and it is 91 right now. So I'm gonna let it cool down 1 degree before I add the cultures in. Let's talk about cheese culture. The culture is what you add to the milk, and it gives it the flavor, and then you end up with the cheese that you intended to make. You'll use a different culture for different kinds of cheeses. Today for the French Tomme, I'm using this MA11. And this MA11 is actually the same culture that I use when I make cheddar cheese. French Tomme is actually just a shortened version of cheddar. You go to a certain point, and then instead of cheddaring the curds and making a cheddar cheese, you just put it in the cheese press. So it's a little bit of a quicker cheese, but it still tastes delicious. Now that the milk's the right temperature, I'm gonna add in the culture. You wanna give it a little shake first, get it all mixed in. And then I always like to dump the culture in so I'm not getting any extra bacteria into my culture bag. And you'll do 1/16 of a teaspoon for each gallon of milk. There's the freeze-dried cultures just sitting on top of the milk, and we're gonna let them sit there for 2 minutes, and then we will stir them in and let it ripen for 30 minutes. Make sure you're using 2 pots. I have this big pot with water. I put about that much water in the bottom, and then I submerged my milk pot inside. And that helps keep all of the heat evenly distributed so that the curds can dry out evenly and you'll have a really good tasting cheese. These cultures have been sitting for 2 minutes. Now I'm just gonna stir them in an up and down motion like this for just a few seconds, and make sure there's cultures in the top and in the bottom of the pot. And then we're gonna put the lid on and let it sit for 30 minutes. cultures have been culturing for 30 minutes and now it's time to add in the rennet. I just use this single strength animal rennet from New England Cheesemaking Supply. And you'll use 0.75 ml per gallon of milk. And I use a syringe and just measure it out. That way you can get an exact amount. If you use too much rennet, it could taste weird or be rubbery. So you want to be careful with the amount of rennet you're using. You'll want to get your milk swirling around. And while the milk's moving, just add in the rennet. And then stir it around for another minute or so, carefully. The rennet has been in the pot for about 20 minutes. I checked it at 10 minutes and it hadn't set up yet. So I'm going to check it again and see if it's set up. It's getting close, but it's not there yet. We're going to check this and see if it has set up. We're just going to take a clean hand and touch the very top. And you can see how it's sort of bouncing back when I push it. That means the rennet did what it was supposed to do, and now we have a cheese mass. After you put your rennet in, you want to set a timer and pay attention to exactly how long it takes for your cheese mass to form, for the rennet to set up the milk. It's called flocculation. So you want to know what your exact flocculation time was, and once you have that, mine was 23 minutes today, and it's different every day. You take your 23 minutes and you times it by 1.5 to 2. And you add that time on and you wait. So I'm gonna wait another 46 minutes for this cheese mass to lock in all of the moisture. The cheese has been sitting here for about 45 minutes and we are going to check it again. And you can see it has set up a lot more in the last 45 minutes. So we're gonna check it for a clean break and then we'll cut the curds. You're looking for a clean break. What you're going to want to do is just insert your knife into the cheese and you can see how it's just peeling away like that. And that is a clean break. Now we will cut the curds. To cut the curds, you'll want to make a crisscross pattern and working kind of quickly, but also trying to get your curd size as evenly as possible. If you have big curds and little curds, they won't dry out at the same speed, and that could have effect on the taste of your cheese. So doing your very best, cut the curds as evenly as possible. Once you've gone all the way across, turn your cheese pot a quarter of a turn and go again. It's time to cut the curds vertically. I use this potato masher. It works really good. You can use a bent spoon or ladle or anything really that can get you in there. And then you can slowly cut the curds vertically like this. And then work your way down to the bottom of the pot. And you can see now I've got a bunch of small squares. Once you get to the bottom of the pot, just work your way back up. Now that I've cut the curds that direction, I'm going to take this whisk, and you can see how I've sort of peeled it apart like that. Put it down in the side and bring it back up to the top. And you'll want to do this for 5 to 10 minutes. And that's just going to break up any of the bigger curds and hopefully get them all a more uniform size. I'm done whisking. I whisked for about 10 minutes, and now it's time for my first stirring. And I'm going to stir these pretty rapidly for the next 10 minutes. So the curds have dropped to 89 degrees, but I'm not worried about that right now. I'm not going to add any heat. It's not time to add any heat to these yet. I'm just going to stir it for 10 more minutes and see if I can get the curds to release a little bit more whey. I've been stirring the curds for about 10 minutes without any heat, and they are at 88 degrees. Here's what they look like. And we're gonna start our second stirring, which will take 30 minutes. I turned the heat on the very lowest heat setting, and I'm gonna stir pretty rapidly for 15 minutes. And every 4 minutes, I expect to see the temperature to come up 1 degree. So I stirred for 15 minutes. We brought the temperature up to 92 degrees. So that was a slow, gradual climb. Now I'm gonna turn the heat up just a little bit more, and we're gonna raise the temperature to 103 degrees at a rate of about 1 degree every 2 to 3 minutes. So a little bit faster than last time, while I continue to stir fairly rapidly. I stirred the curds for 30 minutes, and I got the temperature up to 103 degrees. I was very careful not to heat it too far, because anything over 103 degrees will start to kill your starter cultures. So be very careful, watch your heat. And then now that 30 minutes is over, we're going to check these curds and see if they're dry enough to put in the hoop. Okay, here's the curds. You can see they're kind of squishy and plump still. And when I squeeze them together and then try and break them apart, they're still sticking just a little bit. So they do need a little bit more time. I've got my heat off now. I'm gonna just keep stirring them for another 10 minutes. We'll check it again and see if they're ready. For this third stirring, the main goal is to get these curds dry enough that you can put them in the cheese press. And the way you can do that is squish them together. And you can see how they're still kind of sticking together when I push them apart. They should come apart a lot like really dry scrambled eggs or cooked rice. You can taste them. They should be squeaky in your mouth. And don't rush this part of the process. This is one of the big steps that a lot of people get wrong, is they stop cooking the curds too soon and put them in the press, and then they get off tasting cheeses. At this point, I've been stirring my curds for about 50 minutes. My first stirring was 10 minutes, my second stirring was 30 minutes, and then I've been stirring it with my hand for the last 10 minutes. And for this last stirring, there is no set amount of time. You just keep checking the curds, and when they pass all of your tests, they're ready to go in the press. I'm gonna show you what the curds look like now. You see they look like little grains of rice. You can squeeze them together, see how they're kind of springy. And then when I go to push them apart, they just break apart without resistance. That's how you know that the curds are ready for the cheese press. Now that the curds are dry enough, it's time to put them into the cheese press. And I do that by putting a colander over a pot and then my mold inside the colander so that we don't get whey all over the place. You could do this in your sink, but I think sinks are just so gross. So I do it right here. I've sanitized this cheesecloth. I boiled it with everything else. And I am just going to bring my curds over here and slowly start adding them into my cheese mold. This is the part where if you were making a cheddar, you would take the curds and you would heat them up, and that's called cheddaring. And then you would salt the curds and put them in the cheese press. But since we're not doing cheddar, we're doing a French tome, you will do a dry salting after the curds are pressed. This is what the curds look like in the cheese mold, and they are ready to be pressed. This is my cheese press. It's a Dutch cheese press. You could make one of these yourself or you can buy them. I will link mine in the description. It just has this little lever, and depending on where you put your weights is how much pressure gets put on your cheese. And then I'm just going to fold over my cheesecloth on this cheese, and I'm going to start with the lightest amount of pressure. So you don't want to just smash your cheese right away. It's slow, gentle pressure. So you have your cheese mold and then your follower. And after you fold down your cheesecloth, just put your follower on like this. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be flipping this cheese every few minutes for the first little while, so I really don't stress how perfect it is in the press. So these bags are full of water. They have, when they're clear full, they're 7 pounds each. And so if I hang them on the 3, which is the lowest setting, I'm just gonna hang one of them on the 3. 3 times 7 is 21. So I've got 21 pounds of pressure on this cheese. And that might be a little bit much. It's supposed to just kind of be trickling out at a slow rate. So what I could do is I could let some water out of here if it's coming out too fast, but it looks like it's just slowly weeping out. So I think we're good. I'm gonna set a timer for 5 minutes and then I'm gonna flip the cheese over. It has been 5 minutes. I'm gonna flip this cheese and then press it again with just a little bit more pressure than I did the first time. You'll be able to see, I'll bring it closer to you. They are just barely starting to knit together. And they have a long ways to go before they're a nice smooth cheese.
How long have they been gone? It's 70 degrees. Where are the dogs?
I think Dad took the dogs.
I exactly know where. He's just sitting in his pen reading
Now that the cheese is in the press, I'm just gonna spend the next several hours flipping it. I'll flip it every 5 minutes for 4 turns, and then every 30 minutes for 4 hours, I'm gonna turn it, and then hourly until I go to bed. Once it's been pressed for 24 hours, we can pull it out and dry salt it. For a French Tom cheese, you do want to keep the curds warm for the first several hours. So I just take a towel and wrap it around the mold, and that's usually good enough to insulate the curds and keep them just a bit more warm. The cheese has been in the press for just over 24 hours, so now it's time to take it out. We'll look at it, and we're going to do a dry salting on this cheese. Okay, here it is, 2.5 gallons of milk turned into a beautiful wheel of cheese. And now it's time to salt it. Dry salting is really easy. You'll just use approximately 3.5 teaspoons of salt per pound of cheese. And you'll do 1/3 of that every single day. So I'm just doing a tablespoon on this cheese right here. And then I'll do a tablespoon tomorrow and a tablespoon the next day. But you just put the salt on and rub it around, and the salt starts to draw moisture out of the cheese, and it'll get really wet, and the cheese will kind of be sitting in a little bit of a brine right here on this plate. For your salt, you'll want to choose something that's not iodized. I use this cheese salt from Cultures for Health, but you can use any kind of kosher salt. Just make sure that there's not iodine in it, because that can make your cheese taste weird. You do want to cover the cheese. I just take a bowl and set it over the top and tuck it away in a corner and try not to forget about it. At this point, it's been 3 days. I've salted this cheese 3 different times with 1 tablespoon each with the cheese salt. And now the last thing that I'm gonna do is vacuum seal it and put it in my cheese cave. It has been almost 2 weeks to the day since I made this cheese. Well, let's check it out. We tasted it the first few days. You can see where I cut into it, and it tasted really good. It smells good, it smells like cheese. It's starting to get a little bit of mold on that, and that's okay. You can either leave the mold, or you can brush it off with a soft bristles brush. You can do whatever you want. The mold just adds to the flavor, and if you don't like the flavor of mold, then wipe it off. The reason we already tasted it is because I like to know how it's progressing, how the flavor's progressing, and it's okay, just taste your cheese all along the way. I'm gonna put this, I flipped it over, I'm gonna put it back in the cheese cave. It's just a little wine fridge. I have it at 53 degrees, and I'm gonna continue to let it age. Thank you for watching my video on how to make cheese. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe.